Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox and I have a new idea I want to bring you in the final hours of a dark year. This may be a very bright light at the end of the tunnel. It combines video games, community, scientific research, and even vaccines and medical treatments. It's kind of a follow-up to cover new information about vaccines in general that I learned since the last series. But the core concept is about this project called Folding at Home. See, back in 2007 I bought a PlayStation 3, and after a few updates there was this mysterious app added called Folding at Home.
Who would have ever thought that playing a video game could help save lives? It can if you have a PlayStation 3. PS3's maker Sony has teamed up with researchers at Stanford University for a unique project that taps into the power of those little black boxes right in your home. It's called Folding at Home.
Folding at Home is a distributed computing project. So what that means is instead of using one computer to solve a problem, we're tapping the unharnessed power of thousands of computers in people's homes around the globe.
Folding at Home, which started in 2000, has more collective computing power than the world's 7 fastest supercomputers combined. And a lot of what it does is simulate folding proteins. Traditional vaccines are made up of man-made proteins from the virus to train our body's immune system to detect it as a threat before it's forced to learn the hard way. But we underestimate how much of a process to manufacture a vaccine is just learning how to fold a protein. That alone can take anywhere from somewhere around a year to nearly a decade all by itself. Then, scientists and engineers have to figure out how to make a nanoparticle actually fold like that. This process can also take up to a decade, and a lot of the time in this process involves rigorous safety testing. Since each protein folding process can be so different, so unique, it all has to be thoroughly safety tested each time. This is the majority of the safety testing a traditional vaccine gets in a decades-long process. Vaccines made with CRISPR, like the mRNA vaccines made by Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, as well as the DNA vaccines made by Johnson & Johnson as well as AstraZeneca, skip both of those steps and use a genetic engineering approach that is highly regular. This means as long as no new process has to be made to get the intended results, there's nothing to test for safety because this is a very commonly used process as opposed to a unique one, like in a traditional protein vaccine.
A downside to protein vaccines is that you have to manufacture the protein, and the manufacturing process for any given protein is its own unique manufacturing problem. And so in terms of just a physical production problem, you've got to solve that production problem. And since that's unique, the FDA has to basically review every step of it and agree that everything is fine about that. And viral proteins tend to be kind of unusual proteins. They're not super simple to manufacture, so it can take some time and energy to figure out how to solve that basically manufacturing problem, that biochemistry protein synthesis problem. The RNA vaccines bypass that problem because the manufacturing process is always the same. The RNA encodes a different sequence, but molecularly it's the same manufacturing process, and so FDA approval and whatnot is all really fast because it looks the same from a manufacturing standpoint. So that's why the RNA vaccines have gone through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials so fast and gotten FDA approval so quick, is because they were very fast to manufacture and very fast to approve because it's largely, once they solve the problem once, it's plug and play.
I hope this helps you understand why ideas like, it hasn't been tested enough, how can it be safe in a year, are simply ignorant of the realities of how vaccine manufacturing works. Even with a tool like Folding at Home, it often still takes years to figure out how to fold a protein, followed by even more years trying to figure out how to make it in a lab. These 4 vaccines bypass this simply by giving your cells the info to make the protein perfectly itself. At that point, the process that takes us decades to perfect happens in the cell nearly instantaneously. This alone can remove almost all of the time that it takes to make a vaccine. Human safety testing is the last step, and it tends to take less than a year if things go well. It's unfortunately hard to cut any more time from this safety process because most of the time here is just waiting to see how study participants react to it over time. In the case of the mRNA vaccines, we tried to rush this as much as possible by testing very large groups of people to create massive data sets that would get us statistically relevant answers as quickly as possible. But it's been months since they progressed out of these trials, and there have been few complications, long-term or short, though it does seem that based on the limited US data, about 1 in 50,000 may have an allergic reaction that causes anaphylaxis, possibly because of the inclusion of polyethylene glycol in the protective layer around the mRNA called the lipid nanoparticles that help carry it to human cells, but also act as an adjuvant, a vaccine ingredient that bolsters immune response.
So we have the mRNA inside of a lipid nanoparticle. What else goes in the vaccine? Obviously, it's got to be some type of saline solution or something.
Right, that's it. It's basically just delivered in some salt water set to match the saltiness of your own body, so that it's is essentially as natural as possible.
It seems like a question that a lot of people have with vaccines in general is, okay, well, what else do they put in them? And
right.
From my understanding with this Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, they came out and said we didn't put any adjuvants or preservatives in this particular vaccine. Why are adjuvants used sometimes in vaccines?
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially, usually adjuvants are used, and it goes back to what I said about immune memory at the beginning. You know, your immune system remembers some things really well and remembers other things really poorly. And there are complexities there, but the rule of thumb is that the bigger the threat, then the bigger the memory. It's a lot like, you might not be able to remember what socks you put on 2 days ago, but if you were almost in a car accident at some particular intersection, you're going to remember that intersection for a very long time, right? Because it was a memorable event. And so vaccines have to deal with the same thing, that the immune system's good at ignoring things that aren't very threatening. And so adjuvants are a way of providing the immune system a stimulation that says, hey, this thing that you're about to see, this is a potential threat, and you should make a substantial immune response to it and remember it. And so that's, if you just inject a protein by itself, that protein's inert, it's non-threatening, it's not replicating, it's not going to do anything to you. And so the adjuvant is the immune stimulus to get you going.
The LNPs are then pegylated, chemically attached to the PEG molecules that cover the outside of the particles and increase their stability and lifespan. PEGs are also used in everyday products such as toothpaste and shampoos as thickeners, solvents, softeners, and moisture carriers, and they've even been used as a laxative for decades. An increasing number of biopharmaceuticals include pegylated compounds as well. I could be wrong here, but if it's simply an issue with a single ingredient in the LNP that seems like it could be fixed in future versions rather easily, though this may become a moot point. It's probably worth noting the reason we use adjuvants is to increase the immune reaction so that the body recognizes the proteins we're injecting it with as a threat, even though they're basically harmless. So to a certain degree, all of the symptoms, up to something as severe as anaphylaxis, of a vaccine like fever, pain at the injection site, are normal, expected, and even desired. These are signs that your body is taking a threat seriously, and that it will more likely take future encounters with the pathogen seriously as well.
These vaccines are safe. That doesn't mean they're not gonna make it not feel so great for a day or two or have a little bit of a fever, and that can be a really positive thing, because essentially this goes back to your immune system is really designed to remember things that were something of a threat, and so it's you really do kind of have to earn your immunity some, a lot like going to the gym and working out. If you get really sore, that can really be a positive sign. Same kind of thing for a vaccine. If you've got some swelling, if you've got some redness, if you got a little bit of a fever, those are basically all straightforward signs that your immune system is working, is doing its job of recognizing that vaccine and building the tools and weapons to fight the virus if they see it. And usually for most vaccines, that can go on for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And that's been what people have been seeing with these RNA vaccines as well. Most people get a bit of redness and a bit of soreness, and some people get a real fever for a day, and that's honestly just a positive sign that your immune system is fighting it.
After all, it's better to be a controlled amount of sick now than an uncontrollable amount of sick later. Though, this does create a potential downside, and I stress, this part is theoretical as there is not yet the data to suggest this. But it's possible that people with these severe reactions may become more allergic to PEG-containing products. On the other hand, another theoretical downside to this scenario is that it may be that we can no longer use PEG in the LNP of a future RNA vaccine because it would likely get caught by the immune system before it could create proteins in your cells to give you immunity. There's a similar problem to that latter one with the DNA-based approach Johnson & Johnson as well as AstraZeneca used too. They're both using a genetically gutted adenovirus as its mRNA carrier, and this could be flagged by the immune system in such a way that future vaccines made on this platform won't be as effective for the same reasons. Even now, it's important to note that the case fatality rate of COVID-19 is around 2% worldwide, and has been as high as 7% earlier in the pandemic. This means that right now you are 1,000 times more likely to die of COVID than you are to have a serious allergic reaction to the COVID vaccines. It's also important to note that out of the 8 reported cases of serious allergic reactions, there have been no deaths, and now that it's a known side effect, it's one we can more easily look out for and quickly treat. Another risk to weigh with the virus is that having long-term health effects with COVID is even more likely than dying of it. And probably higher than we imagine because of how strange some of the long-term side effects can be, such as lung damage, loss of stamina, blood clots, hair loss, weakened immune systems, and even erectile dysfunction. So yeah, choose wisely when an opportunity becomes available for you to get vaccinated in 2021 when the vaccine becomes much more publicly available.
You can help fight COVID-19. You can help.
When all of this started, the pandemic felt so overwhelming. Staying at home wasn't enough. I needed to help.
It has disrupted the global economy and our daily lives. I speak from experience because I contracted and overcame COVID-19 in March.
Maybe if you could, gather all the computers in the world and put them to work against like a single disease, maybe you'd come up with a really cool solution.
You can help. Your computer can join us and form a supercomputer. It's called Folding at Home.
It's an amazing project. It's a distributed computing project that harnesses the collective power of millions of volunteers to aid COVID-19 research efforts.
Folding at Home runs calculations to understand diseases at the molecular scale and to be able to do things that you could not do by any other means.
For the past 20 years, the Folding at Home project has been pooling the computer power of volunteers from around the globe and bringing it to bear on important problems from Alzheimer's disease to cancer and the Ebola virus. In response to the pandemic, we put all of that important work on hold. We're now focusing everything that we've got on understanding the SARS-CoV-2 virus and identifying new therapeutic opportunities.
With your computing muscle, they're simulating over 100 different proteins related to COVID-19. Your rig is helping researchers find treatments and vaccines faster.
As each tiny protein fold is simulated, the data generated has to be reassembled with the greater project. And speed makes a difference in getting to answers more quickly.
What is one PC? Not much in the grand scheme of things, but together with the power of millions of people around the world, we have achieved something that is remarkable.
And thanks to everyone around the world who has been involved in this program by sharing your unused computing power. It's truly amazing to see such an outpouring of support.
As a medical student, I feel amazing being able to help scientists fight diseases.
This is a great way to help the research community. Get started by installing Folding at Home on your system. Be part of the cure.
So join Folding at Home, and you can look for drugs against COVID together with us.
The whole computing ecosystem has combined to achieve 2.8 exaflops of computing power. That's amazing. That's 10 times the power of Summit, the world's fastest public supercomputer.
Together, our community has created the most powerful supercomputer in the world. But we can still go faster with your help.
We'd love for you to go to the website, foldingathome.org, download and run the software, and join millions of other people to be able to help us and help other scientists defeat this deadly pandemic. Thank you very much.
The cool thing about Folding at Home is that even though we may no longer need it to make vaccines, we can still shift research and massive simulation power into other projects to design drugs that target cancer and HIV, both of which it's already working on. Folding at Home is an online citizen science distributed computing project. In these projects, non-specialists contribute computer processing power or help to analyze data procured by professional scientists. And it's something that anyone can participate in if they have a computer. And at least at one time, even a modern gaming console. This creates an altruistic and anarchic system of computers and engineers working together to solve the hardest problems in science. Folding at Home attracts participants who are computer hardware enthusiasts. These groups bring considerable expertise to the project and are able to build computers with advanced processing power. Other distributed computing projects attract these type of participants, and projects are often used to benchmark the performance of modified computers, and this aspect of the hobby is accommodated through the competitive nature of the project. Individuals and teams can compete to see who can process the most computer processing units. The latest research on Folding at Home involving interview and observation of online groups showed that teams of hardware enthusiasts can sometimes work together, sharing best practice with regard to maximizing processing output. Such teams can become communities of practice with a shared language and online culture. In effect, by working together from around the world, they are constantly teaching each other to be better. Perhaps not surprisingly, this pattern of participation has been observed in other distributed computing projects as well. The power of this broad cooperation was first really recognized on September 16, 2007, when due in large part to the participation of PlayStation 3 consoles, the Folding at Home project officially attained a sustained performance level higher than 1 petaflops, which is a unit of computing speed equal to 1,000 trillion floating point operations per second, becoming the first computing system of any kind to do so. For comparison, the fastest single supercomputer at the time was the Blue Gene, and it could only get up to 0.28 petaflops. The following year, on February 18, 2009, Folding at Home reached 5 petaflops, and was again the first computing project to do so. Meanwhile, November 2008's fastest supercomputer had only narrowly passed the benchmark Folding at Home had set over a year before. And this has only increased steadily since. One of the bright sides to our collective hell year was that increased awareness and participation in the project from interest regarding the coronavirus pandemic. And by March 25th of this year, it had reached 1.5 exaflops, which is 1,000 petaflops, making it the first exaflop computing system, just like how the PlayStation 3 had pushed it to become the first petaflop computing system. Just this August, they posted a video to their YouTube boasting about 2.8 exaflops. Thanks to the Berkeley Open Infrastructure for Network Computing, there are at least 3 more notable projects like this, each with their own goals within science. Einstein at Home studies neutron stars. Milky Way at Home aims to generate accurate 3-dimensional dynamic models of stellar streams in the immediate vicinity of the Milky Way. And SETI at Home combs the skies and airwaves for any sign of alien life. But to give you an idea of scale though, as of 2018, the entire BOINC system could only sustain around 20 petaflops. Another big bright side is you, watching this video, because now you know that you can share your computer's powers with the behemoth of a collectivized system to make medical or astrological advances happen just that much faster. It's like bit mining, but instead of making cryptocurrencies, you help create scientific advances for the greater good of human health. CRISPR is advancing research into genetic engineering in a similar way. It's such a cheap and simple platform that doesn't even require the sophisticated or expensive labs of scientific tools with even half its power. Genetic engineering is still happening in traditional labs around the world, but increasingly among educated biohackers working out of labs in their garages, much like the computer engineers that started to take off in the 1970s to 1990s. It's getting to the point where a breakthrough in the next vaccine or gene therapy might come from work done in a neighbor's garage after they get off work. But until then, you don't need a background in genetics to give a little bit of your computer power to folding at home, so that a part of the next medical advance might happen, in part, at your house, at the same time that it happens in thousands and thousands of other houses around the world. If you are still watching the video at this point, I'd like to take the time to ask you to check out the following channels, which, like my own, have not reached 1,000 subscribers yet. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, hit that button, ring that bell, do the YouTube stuff. And in an effort to keep this channel ad-free into the future, I would also ask that if you appreciate the content I'm putting out here, that you could go over to my Patreon, or even for a one-time donation, my Ko-fi page, and send me a little bit of money to help me make ends meet in a year that has been troubling the hell out of everyone.